Ozioma always waited. The line never changed. Her brothers first, then the aunts who only visited to complain, the cousins who kicked her feet under the table and blamed it on her. Then came the stepfather, slow and loud and always licking his fingers one by one, as if each held the secret to joy. After him, her mother, who had grown thinner not from hunger but from something else, something worse. Something called shame. When they had all eaten, licking bones clean, dragging their spoons across the bottom of bowls like they were searching for gold, someone would call out, "Bring the bowl." Ozioma would rise from the corner where she crouched and drag the heavy bowl forward. It was never the same bowl, but it was always that bowl. Dented. Brown from age or insult. She would carry it with both hands, even though it was often empty when she got it. But the emptiness wasn't the punishment. It started with the spit. Her uncle, who smelled like sweat and palm gin, was the first. He hawked loudly as if summoning a spirit, and let the thick stream fall into the bowl. Her cousins followed. One once said, "This is how we bless it for you." Then they laughed. They always laughed. The stepfather spat 3 times, once for her ugly face, once for her demon birth, and once just in case. Her mother, eyes lowered, remained silent. She never spat, never spoke. But her silence was a spit of its own kind. "Say thank you," the uncle would say, wiping his chin. And she did. Every time. Thank you. Quiet. Soft. Smile included. Because without that thank you, and the smile, the bowl would be taken away. And they wouldn't offer it again. Not until tomorrow. Sometimes they threw scraps into it, fish bones, yam peels, leftover pap, the water from boiled meat. Once, a cousin dropped a whole tomato into the bowl and called it a feast. They laughed as it rolled around, staining the spit. The taste never mattered. Hunger changed that. Hunger stripped everything except survival. Hunger made spit feel like soup, made leftovers feel like gifts. Hunger made shame something distant, like thunder in another village. At first the taste made her gag. Her stomach would clench, her throat would seize. But if she vomited, they said she was ungrateful. If she pushed the bowl away, they made her kneel in the sun for hours, hands raised until her arms went numb. So she learned to swallow. She learned to chew slowly even when there was nothing to chew. She learned to smile without her lips shaking. Ozioma did not remember when this began. It had always been this way. As long as she could walk, she was the one who waited. As long as she could speak, she was the one who thanked. There were days the bowl came dry. Those were the worst, because she still had to say thank you. Even for nothing. She would pretend to drink, lift the bowl to her lips and tilt it, careful not to let it show that it was empty. The heat in her belly would rise, not from food but from the echoing laughter. One day her younger cousin Ebra snatched the bowl from her hands before the ritual could begin. He danced with it, sloshing the contents until a chunk of something slid out and landed on her foot. It was a lump of audrey, slimy and sour. Everyone howled. But Ozioma picked it up, put it back in the bowl and knelt. "Thank you," she said, swallowing the bile in her throat. She ate slowly. She always did. Each bite had to last, had to fill the space where dignity used to live. One night, her mother followed her into the small hut behind the compound. Ozioma sat on the floor, licking the last smear from the inside of the bowl with her finger. Her tongue had grown skilled, she could find flavor where others found filth. Her mother said nothing at first. Just watched. "You don't have to say it anymore," she said finally. Ozioma blinked. "Say what?" "Thank you." Ozioma looked down at the bowl. It was empty but still wet. Her reflection warped and shimmered in the spit. "If I don't, they won't feed me." I can find a way," her mother whispered. Ozioma stared at her. "You've watched every time." Her mother's lips trembled. But she didn't deny it. "They'll say I'm cursing them," she said. "If I protect you. They already say worse." That night, Ozioma didn't sleep. The bowl rested beside her. For the first time she didn't clean it. She left it messy, crusted. It smelled of garlic oil and contempt. The next morning no one spoke to her. She was forgotten, a shadow in the corner. When the call came, "Bring the bowl," she hesitated. She rose. She carried it to them. "Say it," her uncle barked, slapping his chest. Ozioma stared at the bowl. Something shimmered inside it, not light. Something darker. Like a shadow leaning too far forward. "Thank you," she said. But the smile didn't come. "Smile," her cousin snapped. She tried. Her lips twitched but they didn't rise. They stayed flat. Heavy. "Ungrateful thing," someone muttered. Her stepfather stepped forward and raised his hand. But the bowl shivered in her hands. Just once. A small vibration like a trapped sound trying to escape. She didn't flinch. The hand lowered. That night, she licked her finger and tapped the inside of the bowl 3 times. "Thank you," she whispered. This time something answered. Not in words. Not yet. Just a pulse. A hum beneath the clay. Days passed. The bowl changed. Slightly. Hairline cracks mended. The color darkened. It grew warm faster, retained heat. The spit began to bubble, faintly as if reacting. Her mother noticed. That bowl? Ozioma didn't look up. It listens. The next evening one of the ants spat into it and coughed blood. No one connected it. Not then. The cousin who mocked her most burned his tongue eating pepper soup. His lips blistered for days. Her stepfather dropped the bowl once and it refused to break. He cursed her but kept his distance. And still she waited. Still she brought it forward. Until the day they forgot to call her. Dinner came. Plates were passed. Voices rose in laughter and gossip. But no one said, "Bring the bowl." She sat in the corner, her hands wrapped around the cool clay. She waited. Eventually they turned. "Aren't you going to bring it?" someone asked. "No one asked," she replied softly. They paused. "Well, bring it now." She rose. But she didn't smile. When she knelt, the bowl steamed. The smell was sweeter, not bitter. No one spat. Not that night. Her mother walked over, slowly carrying a small bowl of rice. She didn't say a word, just knelt beside her and poured half into Ozioma's bowl. The room fell silent. Ozioma didn't smile. But she ate. That night she placed the bowl beside her pillow. She whispered into it. "Thank you," she said. It answered with warmth. Not for them. For her. They watched her as always. Her uncle's eyes narrowed as he scraped his bowl. Her cousin tapped the floor with her foot, pretending not to stare. Her stepfather licked the back of a spoon slowly, his smile too wide. "Bring the bowl," someone muttered. Ozioma stood up from the shadowed corner, lifting the bowl that had waited with her all day. It was lighter than usual. They hadn't eaten well themselves. Some meat had gone bad, some yams too soft to boil. But that didn't matter. The ritual mattered. Her humiliation mattered. They passed it again, each one dropping in their offering. A cough from the ant, a loud spit from her cousin, a laugh snort from her stepfather as he tossed in the stub of a peppery bone. Her mother said nothing. She never did. "Say it." "Thank you," Ozioma whispered. "Smile." She tried but her mouth was stiff. It didn't quite rise. Her lips trembled, paused halfway. They didn't notice. They were already looking away, satisfied that the ritual was done. She sat by the fire pit behind the house as always, bowl in lap. It had become routine. Familiar. A performance. Only tonight something felt different. The scent hit her wrong. The contents looked more alive than usual. The bone bobbed once. The oil floating on top shimmered with a sick green hue. It made her stomach turn before it touched her tongue. Still, she brought the bowl to her lips. And stopped. She could almost hear the spit fizzing, hissing like oil on a pan. Her fingers tensed. She dipped her finger into the sludge. Lifted it. Let a single drop fall back into the bowl. It landed with a sound like breath. Almost a sigh. Ozioma looked at the fire. She had never disobeyed the ritual. Not really. She had always swallowed even when it made her sick. Even when her throat closed up, when bile scratched its way up the back of her mouth. But tonight, no. She scooped a small spoonful and held it against her tongue. It tasted the way rot felt, sour, hot, heavy. She didn't gag. She didn't flinch. She held it in her cheek. She chewed nothing. Swallowed nothing. Her lips moved in slow mimicry. She lowered the bowl as if finished, wiped her mouth as if grateful. Then she waited. Minutes passed. No footsteps. No eyes watching. She turned to the fire. With one motion, fast, practiced, she spit the mouthful into the flame. Cracked. Not the normal pop of burning wood. This was sharp. What? A hiss with a second sound beneath it, a bubbling laugh. The fire turned green. Just for a moment. A flare. A shimmer. The logs darkened, the smoke spiraled in the wrong direction, downward instead of up. Then like nothing happened it was back to orange. Ozioma stared. Her breath caught in her throat. That night she slept with the bowl next to her pillow as always. But she didn't sleep well. She dreamed of a face. A woman's face, or what used to be one. The smile came first. Then the eyes. The skin looked soft but wrong, like cloth stretched over old fruit. The teeth were brown and black, chipped and leaning. But the lips curled in a grin that felt oddly kind. "You learned?" the woman said. Ozioma couldn't speak. The woman's hair was made of ash. Her eyes two pale holes. Her mouth opened and more green fire leaked from between the gaps. You let it feed the flame, she whispered. Ozioma shivered. Next time, the woman said, let it feed you another way. She woke up gasping, her mouth tasting of smoke. The bowl was still there. But inside, stuck to the side of the clay, was a small seed. She hadn't seen it before. It was black, dry, but shaped like a tear. She touched it. The seed jumped. She didn't scream. She closed her fingers around it instead and slipped it into the fold of her wrapper. The next day things were quiet. Too quiet. Her uncle didn't call for her. The cousins didn't laugh. She crept to the fire pit and listened. Her stepfather was arguing with someone, about debts, about hunger. The food had spoiled again. She eats our luck, someone spat. We feed her shame and she turns it into curses. She eats less than a rat, another voice snapped. But no one called her. That evening the bowl sat untouched. No one spat. No one mocked. Her mother gave her a look, not kind, not cruel, just unsure. She waited until the yard was empty. Then she took the bowl and sat by the fire again. She didn't put anything in it, just stared. The green flame, if it had been real, hadn't come back. The bowl remained cool. She reached into her wrapper and took out the seed. It pulsed once in her palm, like a heartbeat. Then she whispered, feed me. She didn't know why she said it. But the bowl warmed. She blinked. Inside, the cracked clay began to hum faintly, a sound she felt more than heard. Her stomach growled. Not in hunger but in echo. It didn't hurt. It was expectant. She looked into the bowl. Still empty. But she brought it to her lips anyway. And the scent that greeted her was sweet, soft. She closed her eyes. It was not food. It was not salt or oil or pepper. It was memory. She saw her grandmother, long dead, pounding yam under the full moon. Saw her as a toddler, her mouth stuffed with puff-puff, fingers sticky with honey. She tasted mango skins, roasted plantain, fried okra. The bowl was still empty. But her stomach grew warm. Satisfied. She whispered, thank you, but not to them. Never to them again. The fire crackled green once more, just for a blink, then went quiet. That night she didn't dream. She didn't need to. She woke rested, full, clean. At breakfast they noticed. She didn't come for the bowl. Is she sick? Maybe she found another way to eat. She's cursed. She's full of ash. But Ozioma just smiled. A real smile. Small. Quiet. True. The bowl waited in her hut that night, cool and calm. The seed she had kept was gone. But her hunger had left with it. Ozioma's smile changed slowly. Not overnight, not all at once. But gradually, like a bowl left out in the sun too long, warping, bending, hardening into something else entirely. It was no longer the careful smile of survival, the one she used to earn a spit-filled bowl and a few dry words. Nor was it the nervous grin of a child trying to remember her place. It was something quieter now. So, what? A little too wide. And it never left her face. The first to notice was the bread-seller's son, Chuka. He'd walked past her as she sat beside the fire pit one dusk, the empty bowl on her lap untouched. She'd nodded and smiled, calm, unmoving. Chuka slowed, frowned, looked over his shoulder as he passed. She smiles too long, he muttered later to his mother. It doesn't blink. His mother hushed him with a swat, but she looked out her window more often after that. Ozioma sat in silence most evenings. Her hands folded, her lips upturned. She spoke only when spoken to. And always she said thank you. Thank you, she murmured to her stepfather when he shoved the bowl at her feet, though the contents frothed with leftover fat and floating green skins. Thank you, she said to her cousins when they laughed about her bent spine, her muddy wrapper, the way her feet scraped the ground when she walked. Even when she lifted the bowl and found worms squirming in the broth, she only smiled. And said, thank you. The first time a worm lifted its pale head and twitched toward her mouth, she stared at it. She did not flinch. The worm quivered, then stopped. It sank back down into the broth, hiding beneath a slice of yam already gone gray. She ate around it. That night, her smile lingered in her sleep. Her mother entered the hut and stood in the doorway, unsure whether to speak. Ozioma lay curled on the mat, her eyes closed, her lips slightly parted, but the smile remained. It unnerved the woman. Not because it was cruel, but because it seemed like something else was wearing her daughter's face. In the morning, the villagers murmured louder. She walks without shadow, said one. She doesn't blink when she smiles, whispered another. I passed her on the path and greeted her. She smiled back, but I swear my teeth hurt. The elder Egbuna, oldest in the village, stopped mid-stride when he saw her crouched by the river path. She looked up, smile still and easy. Egbuna took one step back. "Ah," he said softly. "That child, she smiles like something watching through her." They began avoiding her. Not cruelly, not overtly, but in steps, a slightly wider path when walking past. A longer pause before returning her greetings. Bread sellers who suddenly had nothing to sell. Water bearers who hurried away with their jugs when they saw her approach. And yet Ozioma kept smiling. Even when they pretended not to see her. Even when her stepfather handed her a bowl of meat with maggots swimming between bone. Even when her cousin pushed her into the ash heap and muttered, "Filth should live with filth." She stood up, smiled, brushed herself off. "Thank you." She didn't even blink when one of the glowing coals rolled under her heel. She stepped over it, her feet bare, unburned. The air around her felt warmer now. Not hot but waiting. Like a silence stretched too thin. Some began to whisper, perhaps she was cursed. Others claimed she was just mad. But the oldest grandmother, the one who lived alone on the far side of the stream and only came to market once a month, she said something else. She stood near the shrine one morning, staring into the distance. "That is not madness," she said to no one in particular. "That is inheritance." They laughed, but not loudly. That evening a visitor arrived. A man from another village. A cloth merchant. He brought bolts of dyed fabric wrapped in wax paper, beads knotted in strings, bracelets of carved bone. He spread them out beneath the old tree waiting for customers. None came. Not until Ozioma passed. She didn't approach. Just walked slowly the way she always did. But her head turned and she looked once, briefly, at the merchant's wares. He shivered. Later, he told someone he didn't even mean to speak, but the words had come unbidden. "Do you like colors, child?" She had smiled. The wide, still smile. He packed up before sunset and never returned. That night, the villagers gathered for a small celebration. A child had survived a fever. A chicken had laid 2 eggs from one womb. Someone played a flute. Someone else beat a drum. Ozioma stood just beyond the firelight. Not dancing. Not clapping. Watching. Smiling. Someone offered her a cracked gourd with sour drink in it. She took it, tipped it slightly to her lips, smiled wider. Then said, "Thank you." The person who handed it to her staggered back. The drink had not spilled, but they swore it burned their tongue. By morning that same person woke with a rash around their mouth. The elders said nothing, but their eyes flicked more often to the hut where Ozioma slept. Her smile had begun to leak into her voice. Even when she wasn't smiling, people swore they heard it, in the way she said "good morning," or "may I pass." Even when she was silent, the smile felt present, just beneath her words. One boy, small, dirty, ignored by most, dared to follow her once. He walked behind her as she went to fetch water. She knew he was there. She said nothing. She filled her jug, turned, smiled. He looked into her eyes and screamed. When they found him, he'd run all the way to the banana grove. His nose bleeding, his shirt wet. He said only, "It looked back at me." They asked, "Who?" He said, "The smile." It looked back. After that, no one followed her. But the pigs did. 3 of them. No one knew where they came from, but they began trailing her path. Quiet, low to the ground. They grunted when she passed. Laid beside the ashes where she sat. Sniffed the air when she ate. She didn't feed them. Didn't touch them. But they followed her anyway. One day her mother left a full plate outside the hut. Fresh yam. Steamed greens. A bit of goat skin. Ozioma walked outside. Stared at the plate. Stared at her mother. Smiled. And walked away without touching it. Her mother collapsed in tears. The food spoiled within minutes. And still Ozioma smiled. Not wide. Not cruel. Not fake. Just steady. Until one evening she found herself standing at the edge of the square. Alone. The village had gathered on the other side. Music, laughter, the smell of roasted meat. She turned. Began to walk away. And then, someone said her name. Softly. Without mockery. Ozioma? Was a girl. Young. Maybe 7. Eyes too big for her face. She held out a hand. And in it, a seed. Black. Shaped like a tear. Ozioma tilted her head. The smile faltered. Only slightly. She took the seed. Closed her fingers around it. Felt it twitch once in her palm. The child said, "I saw the green fire too." And smiled not like Ozioma. But like someone who had once cried. Ozioma nodded once. The pigs gathered behind her. She did not say thank you. Not this time. The smile stayed but softer now, as if it were truly hers. The first fly came at dawn. Ozioma had just stepped from her hut, arms slack at her sides, smile already perched upon her face like an old, familiar garment. Her bare feet pressed into the clay with practiced silence. The morning mist was low and dew clung to the weeds like tired spirits. The village dogs barked in the distance, half-hearted, more afraid than angry. And then there it was, a single black fly circling her head once, twice, then vanishing behind her shoulder. She did not swat it. She did not shudder. She only blinked, once, and smiled. By midday there were dozens. Not buzzing in her ears or clinging to her skin. No, they followed her like sentries. They hovered in a loose, lazy cloud as if the air was somehow thicker around her. But not one landed on her. Not her cheek, not her feet, not even her shadow. Instead they waited. And when Ozioma passed others in the village they moved, not toward her but toward them. The first to complain was Amaka, the miller's daughter. As she sat chewing fried groundnut near the courtyard, a fly landed directly on her lips. She swatted it away only for two more to descend. "What is this?" she hissed, wiping her mouth. "Filthy beasts." Ozioma walked by, her smile resting like a mask carved of calm. Amaka sneered. "Maybe they think you're sweet," she muttered loud enough to be heard. "Or maybe they think you're meat." Another fly landed on Amaka's mouth. She slapped at it angrily and a dull crack sounded. She gasped. A single tooth fell from her lip, coated in blood. Ozioma stopped walking. Turned her head slightly. Smiled. The flies did not leave. They hovered around Amaka for the rest of the day. At first people thought it was a joke. Maybe she hadn't brushed. Maybe she'd angered the ancestors. But then it happened again. And again. When Ozioma passed her stepfather at the well, flies rose from the rim like smoke. They followed him even after she had gone. He coughed, swore, waved his hands like a madman. They crawled across his face. One entered his nostril. By sunset, he had locked himself inside and stuffed cloth in every crack of the door. The next morning, a goat was found dead near the edge of the market. No wound. No blood. Just lying still, eyes open. The flies didn't touch the goat. They waited by Ozioma's hut. One of the boys dared to toss a stone at her from behind the old fig tree. The rock missed, but she turned anyway, slowly, and looked toward the tree. Her smile didn't move. But 3 flies broke away from the swarm and darted into the tree's leaves. The boy screamed. He ran out moments later, scratching his neck wildly. His skin puffed up with welts. His mouth swelled until he couldn't speak. His mother blamed mangoes. His father blamed curses. Everyone else said nothing at all. And still Ozioma smiled. She never commanded the flies. Never spoke to them. Never fed them or flinched around them. She simply walked and they followed and they obeyed. One afternoon she passed by the shrine where the elders sat in the heat. They were discussing offerings for the harvest, their voices dry and sharp. As she crossed the courtyard, one elder paused mid-sentence. A fly had settled on the tip of his tongue. He gagged, coughed, and slapped at his own face. The fly did not move. Another settled on his lower lip. Then his eye. He stood up, trembling. Ozioma walked past without turning her head. "Child," he croaked, "what have you brought here?" She stopped only once she reached the shrine gate. Her feet dusted with red sand. Her face turned slowly. Her smile grew, just a breath wider. "I only follow where I'm sent," she said. Then she left. By evening the elder had taken ill. His mouth blistered. His lips cracked. He could no longer drink without bleeding. People started calling the flies Ozioma's wings. Children ran from her path. Adults stood still when she approached, hoping silence would save them. But the flies didn't punish everyone. They ignored the blind woman who offered Ozioma a gourd of clean water. They hovered gently above the heads of younger girls who waved shyly and whispered her name without mockery. One toddler toddled up to her, grinning, and pulled at her wrapper. Ozioma knelt, laid a hand gently on the child's head. The flies landed quietly on the child's shoulders, not biting, not bothering. Just resting like family. The next day the toddler's fever vanished, though it had lingered for weeks. Some began to wonder. Were the flies a curse? Or a choice? Was this justice? Retribution? Or something older than either? Her mother, once mute in the doorway, now watched with a different expression. Not quite fear. Not quite pride. Something tight in her jaw. Her hands began to tremble when she swept. One night she tried to speak to Ozioma. You don't have to, she began. But a fly landed on her wrist. Her mouth shut instantly. Ozioma turned slowly, her face lit only by the moon. She stepped closer. A single fly circled her head once, then landed on the bowl in her mother's hands. The woman dropped it. The bowl cracked. Ozioma bent down, picked it up gently, cradling it like a bird with a broken wing. Then looked at her mother. "Thank you," she said, and smiled. By now, flies waited outside her hut each morning. A thick ring of them hovered in place like a gate made of wings. They moved only when she stepped forward. She walked through them like fog. One evening, the village priest sent a messenger to summon her. The boy who came was shaking. He didn't step too close. "The priest wants to speak with you. To understand," he whispered. She stared at him, then turned her back and walked away. The next day, the shrine was covered in black wings. No prayers could be heard over the buzzing. By week's end, Ozioma no longer needed to speak. People who had mocked her began offering her gifts: fruit, cloth, bits of soap. They placed them near her hut and retreated. No one asked for her blessing. No one dared. But the flies were merciful. One girl, young with burns on her hands, came near and whispered, "Please." The flies moved aside. Ozioma opened her arms. The girl stepped forward and buried her face in Ozioma's wrapper. From that day, the girl's hands began to heal. When Ozioma walked through the village now, she left no footsteps. Only silence. And the slow, patient hum of wings behind her. She did not raise her voice. She did not run. She only smiled. And in that smile, the village began to see itself, not as it was but as it had made her. One fly. One tooth. One whispered "thank you" at a time. At first it was only a murmur. When Ozioma lifted the spit-tainted bowl to her lips, there was a sound, not a hiss, not a whisper, but something like a ripple through bone. A wet syllable brushing the edge of language. She paused, blinked, sniffed the contents. It smelled the same as always, sour, bitter, laced with cruelty. The warmth of it came not from heat, but from the shame of what it was. But this time, when she opened her mouth to say her ritualized "thank you," she stopped halfway. Her lips parted, but the word didn't form. Because something else was speaking. The sound came from the food. Not a growl. Not a curse. A voice. Small. Slippery. Like it had no tongue but remembered how one worked. She lowered the bowl. The laughter from her stepfather's friends rang behind her. "Too good for our leftovers now?" one mocked. Ozioma smiled, wide, sweet, empty, and took her first bite. The stew bubbled once as if exhaling. And then, the boy in red stole the elder's yam seeds. Her spoon paused midair. She looked up. The boy in red sat across the courtyard, chewing noisily. He had dirt on his chin. His eyes avoided hers. She took another bite. The ground behind your home is not just soil. It holds small bones. She nearly choked. But she swallowed it. There were no more voices that day. Just those two. But that night, as she lay on her mat, the words circled inside her. Bones behind the house. Yams stolen. Secrets hidden in spit. The next morning, she woke early and walked to the backyard, careful not to alert anyone. She knelt in the thinnest patch of weeds and pressed her hand into the earth. It was soft. Softer than it should have been. And warm. She dug with her fingers. Not far, not deep. A button. A strip of cloth. A tiny bone, not long enough to be from any grown person. Her breath caught. She said nothing. But when breakfast came and her plate of spit-smeared ugali was passed down with sneers, she accepted it calmly. The first bite sang to her. She curses your mother every new moon. In the dark, in the mirror. Her tongue splits when she does it. Ozioma blinked. Her stepmother sat 3 feet away, grinning into her own bowl, unaware. She took another bite. The priest knows. He helped bury the child. He said the ancestors would forget if the soil was deep enough. She swallowed. And smiled. That was the day the food became her gospel. Each meal was a sermon of sins. Each mouthful a scripture of hidden truths. Her tormentors, thinking they fed her humiliation, were instead feeding her knowledge. Every taunt they spat into her food, every trace of saliva, every flake of skin, became a voice. And the voices were hungry to be heard. She learned to eat slowly, listening with her whole body. One spoonful would echo a name. Another would paint a memory. Sometimes the food cried. Sometimes it hissed. But it never lied. The rice told her who had thrown her doll into the latrine pit. The broth told her which neighbor had wished her barren before her first blood. The plantains told her the name of the man who broke her mother's ribs when she was still in the womb. The food was her enemy. Now it was her friend. At first she thought she was mad, that the starvation had cracked her open. But then one day she decided to test it. She scraped the remains of her lunch into the fire. Waited. The flames hissed, laughed, then died in a strange green curl. That night, she mixed her food with the dog's bowl and fed it to the family dog. The dog howled. It backed away, teeth bared at the empty air. Then ran, tail between its legs, yelping into the night. She knew. It was real. And now she had a choice. She could spit the food out. She could go hungry. But hunger was no longer the worst thing. Silence was. So she kept eating. One day the food said, he plans to send your mother away. To blame her for the dead goat. Tomorrow. After the market. The next day, Ozioma stole a strip of goat meat, rubbed it with palm ash, and left it under her stepfather's bed. When the goat went missing, the elders searched every home. And there, under his mat, they found the ash-covered strip. He was flogged. Her mother stayed. No one suspected Ozioma. She was just the girl with the empty bowl and the too-wide smile. The next week, the food told her of a girl in the next compound, Urena, who stole from her dead aunt's grave. Beads buried with her bones. She sells them. Calls them borrowed blessings. Ozioma waited. And when Urena mocked her behind the water hut, she whispered back, softly, sweetly, "Does your aunt mind that her bones were no beads?" Urena's face turned pale. She avoided Ozioma from then on. The food laughed in her belly. Sometimes the voices in the bowl argued with each other. Sometimes they sobbed. One day they said nothing, only sighed long and deep, like wind passing through a hollow gourd. Those were the days Ozioma didn't eat. The secrets had gone quiet. But they always returned. Soon the bowl itself began to change. It grew warmer in her hands. It steamed even when the food was cold. Sometimes when she wasn't looking, it tilted toward her lips, as though it was thirsty for the truth it carried. One afternoon a visitor came, an old woman with clouded eyes. She passed Ozioma on the way to the shrine and stopped. "Your smile," she said softly, "is too still for a child." Ozioma tilted her head. Said nothing. The old woman leaned closer. "Do they know it feeds you now?" she whispered. Then walked away. That night, the food whispered something it had never said before. She knows. The old one. The blind. She remembers what was done to her. She hears the rot under the songs. Ozioma sat still for a long time. Then ate the last bite. She began collecting stories, not from lips but from mouths. Literally. She saved scraps. Dried them in the sun. Bit off tiny pieces when alone, listening to the truths they held. A scrap of bread told her who poisoned the river last moon. A piece of roasted yam told her who prayed for her to die. A twist of bean cake told her which boy had buried a knife behind her hut. She said nothing. But her eyes began to change. Wider. Darker. Brimming with things no girl should know. People noticed. One woman whispered to her neighbor, "That child looks like she's listening even when no one's talking." The neighbor replied, "Maybe she hears something else." Soon Ozioma began choosing what to eat. She avoided anything untouched by another's mouth. She preferred leftovers. She waited until the family spat, cursed, mocked. Then with grace she picked up her bowl and listened to it sing. One evening her mother stood outside the hut, hands trembling, holding a small piece of fried plantain. She didn't speak. She just offered it. Ozioma took it. Bit slowly. The voice inside was faint, hesitant. She still loves you. She still remembers you before the hurt. She wishes she had screamed louder. Ozioma closed her eyes. She did not cry. But for the first time her smile softened. That night the fire in her dreams did not laugh. It only glowed. Warm. Welcoming. The next morning the village woke to find words painted across the elders' compound wall. Not with ink, not with paint. But with spit. Dark stains that spelled, "we know." No one knew who wrote it. But when they saw Ozioma walking past, her bowl balanced on her head, flies trailing behind her, they did not ask. They simply looked away. And tightened their lips. They passed her the bowl like always, slowly, deliberately, like it was a gift and not a curse. As if their laughter didn't cling to it like grease, as if their saliva hadn't glazed the rim. As if they weren't handing her the very thing they scraped from their mouths, their malice stirred into every chunk. But this time Ozioma did not smile. She took the bowl in both hands, steady and light, and nodded once. No curve of her lips. No, thank you curled on her tongue. She sat in her usual place, the dust cooling beneath her knees, and began to eat. No fanfare. No performance. Just quiet chewing, slow and even. Around her, silence thinned the air like heat. Her stepfather shifted on his stool, blinking. You forget your manners, girl? Ozioma didn't look up. She scooped another bite, raised it to her lips, and ate it without blinking. The others chuckled uneasily. One cousin elbowed another. Too good to say thank you now, eh? Maybe the flies have made her queen. Still nothing from Ozioma. No words. No smile. Only the scraping of her spoon against the hollowed wood of the bowl. It was the quiet that frightened them more than anything. Because Ozioma had always smiled, even when her teeth bled. Even when her hands trembled from hunger or cold. She'd always said thank you, in that eerie, steady voice, even when fed something fouled or crawling. But now her silence felt full, not empty. It swelled the air, made every laugh sound forced, made even the pigs glance over and fall still. Her mother didn't look up once during the entire meal. Her hands shook where they rested on her lap. After Ozioma licked the final trace of stew from the spoon, she placed the bowl beside her on the dirt, gently. She didn't rise. She didn't ask to leave. She only sat, eyes forward, unblinking, until her stepmother clicked her tongue and barked, "Go!" She did. But she left the silence behind her, like a shadow stretching into the corners of the compound. That night it began. The chief's daughter was the first to wake, clutching her belly, heaving onto her mat. Her screams echoed off the courtyard walls. Moments later her uncle, one of Ozioma's loudest taunters, stumbled into the darkness outside, retching into the shrubbery. He dropped to his knees and howled as his tongue swelled so thick he could no longer speak. By midnight 5 people had fallen ill. By morning 9. All the same, nausea, thick tongues, a buzzing in their ears. None had eaten from the same pot. None had shared a drink. But every single one had mocked Ozioma the day before. None of them could keep food down. Even water tasted like rot in their mouths. In the healer's hut, a boy whimpered, "Her smile didn't come yesterday. She didn't say thank you." And that whisper spread faster than the sickness. They began to speak her name with caution. Not fear, not yet, but unease. Like stepping barefoot over coals that hadn't caught fire but still steamed when it rained. Meanwhile, Ozioma slept soundly. Her mat didn't creak. Her breath didn't hitch. Her dreams were quiet, empty, cool. No laughing flames. No whispering teeth. Just the hum of her own heart, slow and deep, like a drum in the belly of the earth. In the morning she woke early and walked to the compound kitchen. The cook, an older woman with a lazy eye, froze when she saw her. I didn't know if you'd want." "I'll eat," Ozioma said simply. Her voice was steady. Not sweet. Not cold. Just level, like a knife resting on a table. The cook placed the bowl down without meeting her eyes. And for the first time in years, Ozioma ate the food fresh. No spittle. No second-hand bites. She ate slowly. She did not smile. She did not speak. But when she placed the bowl back on the table, the flies didn't follow her. They stayed behind, circling the edges of the next pot. By nightfall the vomiting stopped. But no one celebrated. Because the silence hadn't. And Ozioma had never thanked anyone. Not once. Not that day. Not the next. Not even when they tried to smile at her. Not even when her stepfather offered her meat. Not even when her mother, with shaking hands, pressed a clean wrapper into her arms. She accepted it. But her face remained still. They began to wonder, had it been the food that changed her? Or had she stopped playing the game? And if Ozioma wasn't thanking them anymore, was she forgiving them? Or simply watching? The children started whispering that her eyes glowed in the dark now. That when she blinked, they could hear the crackle of flame. No one asked her to say, "Thank you" again. They were too afraid of what else she might say. It started with a smile. Not Ozioma's, she had stopped smiling days ago. It began with the smile of Needy, the girl who'd always been the first to hand her the spit bowl. Needy, who once smeared palm oil over Ozioma's face just to laugh at the stain. Needy, who laughed with her teeth, always as if she wanted the world to see what power looked like. Now those teeth were cracked. It began with a dry patch on her lip, small and flaking. But by the second night, the skin had split down the center, a cruel fissure that bled each time she spoke. When she tried to whisper during market errands, her voice caught in her mouth and came out warped, like her lips were rebelling. The healer told her to apply Shay to stop talking for a day. But that only made the laughter louder. Because when she tried to speak, all that came was a soft, wet clicking. Like something stuck inside her cheeks, fluttering. She covered her mouth with a wrapper. Her eyes darted when she walked. Her laugh, her weapon, was gone. Then it was Chike. His front tooth crumbled as he bit into a cola nut, collapsing like wet chalk. His gums bled and bubbled. He spat red foam into the dirt and blinked like he hadn't understood what had just come from him. When he washed his mouth with warm water, the steam hissed against his lips like it had met fire. They said it was a bad batch. Maybe a curse from a market woman. But Ozioma, from her usual spot by the wall, said nothing. She only watched. At night the air changed. It became thicker. Heavier. The wind didn't blow as it used to, it hovered. As if listening. As if waiting. The pigs stopped grunting. Even the insects at the compound's edge fell silent, except for a strange new sound. A soft, electric buzzing that vibrated beneath the skin. Ozioma woke to it. Not like a dream. Not like a sound outside her. But a pressure in her ears and teeth, a hum in the roots of her gums. She rose from her mat without thought, without effort. The sky outside was deep blue, the moon swollen and low. The fire had died out in the compound center, but a few embers blinked like tired eyes. She stepped barefoot across the ground. Each step was quiet. The night gave her space, parting before her like a curtain. She reached the water pot beside the sleeping hut and sat beside it, legs folded, hands resting gently in her lap. And then she opened her mouth. Not wide. Not loud. Just open, gently, fully, as if something had unlatched inside her jaw. And the sound came. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a chant. It was buzzing. Like bees but sharper. Like wind but deeper. Like the vibration of a name never meant to be said aloud. The air rippled around her. From the sleeping quarters her stepfather stirred. He turned in his mat, muttering in his sleep. His lips split open. He groaned. Inside the women's hut, her aunt gasped, blood staining the mat beneath her cheek. She had bitten her tongue so hard it split. Children whimpered. Teeth loosened. Dreams fractured. And still, Ozioma sat, mouth open, body still, as the sound thickened around her like honey in the air. She closed her lips only when the embers hissed and flared. Only when the buzzing stopped. Only when the wind bowed low as if ashamed. When she stood, her mouth was dry. But her body buzzed. Not with hunger, she hadn't eaten that night. But with something else. Something like knowledge. Or flame. The next morning, her mother would not meet her eyes. Her cousin Ib wept through breakfast, pressing cloth after cloth to his bleeding gum. My teeth feel too big, he sobbed, though they had not grown. He did not eat. Another girl fainted mid-step on the way to fetch water. Her mouth was lined with sores. And through it all, Ozioma said nothing. The silence was not peace. It was power. The elders began to notice. They called meetings behind closed doors. Someone suggested sending for the priestess. But even she had not been spared. The night before, her tongue had swollen twice its size. She could only write in charcoal now. The word she wrote was, mouth. The next night Ozioma did it again. This time not at the water pot, but beneath the Udala tree, where children once played before they learned not to laugh when she passed. She sat beneath it, the roots cradling her back. And again she opened her mouth. And again the buzzing came. It poured out of her like a second breath. Like smoke that had waited too long to rise. It lifted from her throat like something remembering itself. A lizard fell from the tree. 2 pigs squealed and scattered. Somewhere inside a hut, someone screamed in their sleep. But Ozioma remained still. When she stood and turned to go, the Udala tree dropped 3 fruits at her feet, though it was not the season. The next morning the village didn't speak her name. No one did. Even when they looked at her, they swallowed their greetings. Even when she walked past, carrying her calabash, they turned away, lips clamped shut. A child accidentally muttered, Ozioma, while chasing a goat. She was mute for 2 hours. By sundown the name had vanished from every tongue. And yet the mouth injuries continued. Not just bleeding. Not just cracked lips. Some began losing entire molars in the night. Some bit their own cheeks without realizing. One boy woke with teeth marks on his own palms. The healer left the village. The chief fell silent. Only the pigs still made noise. But even they snorted softer when Ozioma passed. Her mother began to whisper at night. Not prayers. Not apologies. Just fragments. Her mouth, she muttered once, thinking no one heard. Her mouth is no longer hers. But it was. It had always been hers. They had tried to fill it with filth, to force it to thank them, to twist her lips into shapes they liked. But the mouth remembers, the tongue learns, and when it splits open, wide enough to let the truth out, it does not forget where it was forced to swallow. That night, Ozioma stood before the fire again. She held the empty bowl they once made her eat from. She opened her mouth. The bowl cracked down the center. A low hum filled the compound. Even the wind halted. When she finally spoke, it was one word. Not a curse. Not a warning. Just a name. Her name. And every mouth that had ever spatted in mockery now trembled in fear. Because this time it echoed back. From walls. From trees. From every space her silence had once filled. And it was louder than any laughter they had ever known. The sky was clear. The palm wine flowed. Drums waited to be struck, and the scent of goat meat and yams drifted over the village square like a promise. It was time for the feast, the one held each harvest when the elders declared, "We give thanks and eat together." But this year something refused to burn. The firewood snapped in half before it could catch. The dry twigs, chosen days before and seasoned well, hissed wet smoke as if they had been soaked in river water. 3 women tried. Then 5. Then all of them, blowing, shielding, praying, but not one spark held. A small flame bloomed in the corner for a moment, but when a clay pot was placed over it, the base of the pot cracked clean in two. The oil spilled into the dust. It did not sizzle. A hush crept into the square. People turned, as if guided by a silent finger, toward the edge of the feast beneath the Ogbono tree. She was already there. Ozioma. Her wrapper was plain. Her hair unbraided. She sat cross-legged on the ground, a wooden bowl in her lap. Inside was nothing festive. No goat meat, no soup, no oil. Just plain white yam. No salt. No sauce. No blessing. She ate slowly. And she smiled. Not the wide, split smile of her past. Not the one they had taught her to perform. This was something else. Something older. It didn't move her lips so much as settle across her whole face, quiet and knowing. She looked like someone who had seen what the rest had refused to look at, and no longer needed to explain herself. Her fingers lifted one piece of yam at a time. She chewed gently. All around her mouths dried. Firewood snapped without cause. One man's pot shattered without even being touched, spraying hot water across his leg. He yelped and backed away as if the earth had bitten him. The elder who had announced the feast stood now in confusion. He cleared his throat, motioned for the drummers to begin. One drummer struck his skin, the taut leather drumhead split like overripe fruit. The sound it made wasn't rhythm. It was warning. Still Ozioma ate. A fly landed on a platter of meat. Then another. Then 10. The meat turned gray. A child reached for a puff, but the dough had collapsed, wet and sagging as if it had been boiled instead of fried. A sour smell rose from the baskets. Women clutched their mouths. Someone whispered, "Did anyone bless the food?" Another said, "We did. The priestess did." But the priestess was not present. She had fallen ill 3 days before. Her tongue had swelled again. Her mouth would no longer form the words. And Ozioma had not said a word. One boy approached her with hesitation. He held out a calabash of broth. She looked at it. Then she looked at him. He lowered it and backed away. Someone tried to start a new fire at the far end of the square. The flame held for a moment, then spat, then puffed into nothing. The villagers grew quiet. Ozioma's bowl was now half empty. She set it beside her, folded her hands on her knees and looked up. Not at anyone. Just up, at the sky. And suddenly the sky felt like it was looking back through her. One by one people sat down. Not to eat. To wait. It wasn't hunger anymore that moved them. It was knowing. The creeping feeling that something had shifted and they had not been present when it happened. Something old and invisible had crossed a line drawn in silence, and they were just now realizing they had eaten curses with their laughter. The stepmother who used to hand Ozioma the bowl could not stop coughing. The man who had spit in her food broke into hives. The girl who mocked her too loudly now bit her own tongue in every sentence. And Ozioma still had not spoken. The white yam was finished. Her hands were clean. But the air was not. It was heavy, charged like before a storm. No breeze, but everything moved, as if stirred by something inside them. She stood. Her bare feet pressed into the earth like roots. The silence didn't end. It grew deeper, richer. Like everyone had to make room for it. She didn't curse. She didn't bless. She simply turned and walked home. And as she left the square, the flies rose like smoke. The food spoiled fully. The laughter died fully. And every bowl that had once waited at the end of the line now sat untouched, heavy with things no one could swallow. They say there was once a girl whose smile could stop your breath. Not because it was beautiful, though it was in a strange, unsettling way, but because it was wide. Too wide. A silence lived inside it. A silence so loud that people heard their own cruelty echoing back from her teeth. Her name was Ozioma. But most don't say it anymore. They just call her the girl who smiled too well. Children hear the tale first from their grandmothers, usually whispered when a child comes home with laughter stuck between their teeth, a joke sharp enough to make someone else cry. The grandmother stops cooking, lowers her spoon and says, "You know who smiled first, don't you?" And the room quiets. They say she was once a child like any other, born to a mother who tried, broken by a man who didn't. They say she ate last after everyone else. That her food came in a bowl passed through too many hands, each one spitting a little insult into it. And she always smiled. Always said thank you. Because that was the rule. But something changed. No one's sure when. Some say it was the night she stopped thanking them. Others say it was when she started smiling without warmth, as if something behind her lips was sharpening itself. The flies came soon after. The buzzing. The silence that stung worse than screams. By the time the village realized she was no longer just a girl, it was too late. And now Ozioma is a name the wind carries on days when the air tastes like iron. On days when your yam tastes a little too bitter. When you swallow something sour and feel someone watching from behind your teeth. They say if you mock a girl who eats alone, your own food will turn against you. They say if you spit laughter at someone who smiles without speaking, your tongue may swell with guilt you cannot swallow. And if you see a girl in the market who doesn't beg, who only looks, don't joke. Don't point. She might smile at you. And that smile may follow you home. There are stories from nearby villages now. A man who mocked his daughter's shyness choked on his own stew, and when he spat it out, it was crawling with maggots, though the pot was clean. A woman who laughed at her niece's silence lost her voice for 7 days, and when it returned, every word she spoke tasted of ash. People whisper of a hut in the forest, always clean, with a single bowl resting at the doorway. They say no one dares eat from it. But some go to confess, to kneel, to press their foreheads to the ground and beg forgiveness for laughs they thought harmless. And sometimes they say if you truly mean it, if you truly ache for what you once did, you'll find a sweet yam waiting in your pocket when you rise. Warm, full, quiet. Other times nothing. Just the buzzing. No one knows if Ozioma still lives there in the forest. Some say she faded into spirit, her body burned out by too much silence. Others say she became something else, not ghost, not god, but memory with teeth. And her smile, they say, is now worn by girls who've learned to keep their pain folded inside their cheeks until it hardens. Girls who do not cry when laughed at. Girls who do not answer when called names. Girls who eat last, but always somehow leave full. So now, when a child comes home with a cruel grin and speaks too lightly of another girl's silence, the elders stop them. Mind your tongue, they say. She's listening. Who? But they don't answer. Instead they pass a yam. Sweet. Golden. Perfect. And they watch. Because if the child takes a bite and makes a face, if they spit it out and say it tastes like something rotting, the old ones only nod. She's watching, they say. And the buzzing begins again.